Sometimes, the worst betrayals wear the mask of perfection. What happens when the dream life is rooted in a carefully constructed lie? For 7 months, Madeline Royce Bellamy believed she had everything she'd ever wanted: a devoted husband, an empire worth millions at their command, and their first child growing inside her. She envisioned a future painted in warmth and wonder inside their breathtaking San Francisco penthouse. But her husband, the magnetic Graham Bellamy, was sketching a different story, one conceived during secretive business trips. When one damning clue emerges, it propels a 7 months pregnant Madeline on a tense drive to a private Monterey Coast hideaway. The elaborate illusion Graham had perfected for months is on the verge of collapse. This isn't just a tale of betrayal. It's a high-stakes drama of deception, corporate gamesmanship, and a woman who realizes that power isn't in the empire you build, but the truth you expose. Stay with us. Late afternoon sun spilled through the expansive floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, casting elongated shadows across the polished white marble floors. From her position, 60 stories above Union Square, San Francisco resembled a living blueprint, orderly, glowing, impossibly distant. Madeline placed one hand over the firm curve of her belly, feeling the gentle movements of the life inside her. At 7 months pregnant, she felt equally unstoppable and fragile. The nursery was finished, a tranquil masterpiece in soft ivory and misty blue, complete with a handcrafted mobile of stars and moons poised to spin above a crib more expensive than most compact cars. Every inch of her life had been designed to reflect perfection, a symbol of the joined legacies of the Royce and Bellamy families. The Royces were old money royalty in Pacific real estate and international logistics, quiet, enduring, untouchable. Graham's wealth was flashier, newer, earned from the volatile trenches of venture capital. He was the golden boy of Silicon Valley, a genius who could read the market like a gambler reads tells. Their wedding had been the social event of the year, a calculated fusion of lineage and audacity. Madeline's fingers trailed the rim of her crystal glass, chilled droplets clinging to her skin. Across the room, Graham stood with his back to her, phone to ear. Graham Bellamy was success personified. His tailored Brioni suit hugged his fit frame with effortless precision, and even through the distance, the timbre of his voice, deep, commanding, could persuade nervous investors and dazzle skeptical executives alike. Even muffled, his voice carried a deep, assured baritone that could calm anxious investors and charm even the most hard-nosed executives. He was her anchor, the magnetic architect of their shared dreams, or so she believed. "No, absolutely not," Graham said into the phone, his tone clipped. "The timeline is locked. We move on the 25th, not a day later. Handle it." He ended the call with a brisk tap and turned, that familiar, well-rehearsed smile softening the sharp edges of his face. "Sorry about that, my love," he said, striding across the expansive living room. "Incompetence is the one market I've never managed to short." His Italian leather shoes made no sound against the thick wool rug. He knelt beside her, one hand resting gently over hers on her belly. "And how are my 2 favorite people in the world doing?" "We're good," Madeline said, her smile returning instinctively. The warmth of his hand chased away a flicker of unease. "He's been active today. I think he's either going to be a soccer star or a CEO who kicks his competition into submission." Graham laughed, the corners of his eyes creasing. He leaned in and kissed her, a deep, reassuring kiss tinged with expensive whiskey. And something else, a scent she didn't recognize. It wasn't Creed Aventus, the cologne he always wore. And it wasn't hers either. It was floral. A little spicy, feminine. She brushed the thought aside. He'd been in back-to-back meetings all day. It could have been anything or anyone. "Listen," he began again, sitting back slightly. His face grew more serious. "Something's come up, a big something." Madeline tensed. "You know the tech merger I've been spearheading, the one in Seattle?" She nodded. It had been his obsession for weeks now. A high-profile acquisition he claimed would revolutionize the AI industry. Well, the key players just flew in for an unscheduled summit. "It's last minute, I know. I hate it, but I have to fly out tonight. It'll only be for a couple of days. 3 max. This is the final stretch. If we close this, our baby's future is set, tenfold." A dull ache tightened in her chest. "Tonight? But Graham, my appointment's tomorrow. The big one. We were going to hear the heartbeat, together." His face softened with perfect, practiced regret. I know, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. I'd give anything to be there holding your hand instead of stuck in another sterile boardroom. But this timing, it's everything. He stroked her cheek gently. I'll be back before you know it, and I swear, I won't miss another one. We'll make it up. A week in St. Lucia after the baby's born, just the three of us. The promise of future luxury was Graham's favorite salve, his go-to fix for present disappointments. Most times it worked. But tonight the unease lingered. It was the suddenness of it all. Graham was known for his precision, his planning, last-minute chaos. That wasn't his style. Of course, Madeline said, forcing a smile. I understand. It's for us. Exactly, he replied, visibly relieved. He stood and kissed her forehead. I should finish packing. My flight's in 3 hours. As he disappeared down the hallway toward their master suite, Madeline's eyes drifted to his briefcase, casually placed beside the sofa. A slip of paper jutted out from the side pocket. A receipt, maybe. Normally she would have never looked. It would have felt like an intrusion, a betrayal of the trust they'd built. But something about tonight, the unfamiliar scent, the abruptness of the trip, the rehearsed quality of his words, pulled at her instincts. Her pulse quickened with guilt and curiosity as she reached out, carefully sliding the receipt free. It wasn't from a restaurant, not a lunch with a client. It was from Arietta, the exclusive lingerie boutique on Union Street. The date was today. She scanned the items listed: a silk camise, an eyelash lace bra, a matching thong, size small. Madeline wore a medium, and now, at 7 months pregnant, lived in nothing but breathable cotton. A heavy chill crawled up her spine. There could be a reason. Maybe it was a gift for a friend's wife, or something meant for her, after the baby. But why not tell her? Why hide it? Why tuck it into a side pocket like a secret? She folded the receipt quickly, slipping it back into place with trembling hands. Her breath hitched. Her chest tightened. The room seemed to close in around her, its once familiar warmth now suffused with suspicion. The soft ticking of the clock grew louder, more accusatory. Her fingers trembled, her mind racing through memories, innocent comments, missed calls, late meetings. Had she missed the signs, or had she simply chosen not to see? She was being paranoid. The stress of the pregnancy was playing tricks on her. Graham loved her. He was building a future for them. He was a good man. Wasn't he? 20 minutes later, he re-emerged, rolling a sleek black carry-on behind him. Dressed for travel in a fitted cashmere sweater and dark tailored pants, he looked every inch the globe-trotting executive. All set, he announced, his tone casual. The car's downstairs. Promise me you'll rest, okay? Don't push yourself. He paused. And Camille's coming tomorrow, right? For the appointment? Madeline nodded, throat too tight to answer. Her sister Camille had always been wary of Graham. She saw his ambition as a blade that could cut both ways. Madeline used to brush it off as protective big sister paranoia. But now, Camille's caution echoed loud in her mind. Good, Graham said, stepping forward to hug her. His arms wrapped around her with practiced strength, warm and firm. And yet, it didn't feel like safety. It felt like performance. It felt like a lie. The embrace, the words, the whole moment, empty, like a scene from a well-rehearsed play. I'll call you the moment I land, Graham said, voice smooth, affectionate. I love you more than anything. I love you too, Madeline whispered, the words dry on her tongue like dust. She watched from the window as he stepped into the sleek black town car, quickly becoming a tiny, indistinct figure 60 stories below. Her gaze followed the vehicle as it pulled away from the curb. It didn't head east, toward SFO or even Oakland. It turned west, toward the Pacific Highway, toward Monterey. A cold certainty sank into her chest like a stone. The Seattle summit was fiction. A beautifully told story, but fiction all the same. The lingerie wasn't for her, and her husband wasn't on a business trip. He was headed toward a rendezvous. Alone in the soaring silence of their penthouse, wrapped in the velvet illusions of their carefully constructed life, Madeline Royce Bellamy let the mask fall. A single searing tear slid down her cheek, silent but prophetic. It marked the beginning of the unraveling. She wasn't just a wife, she was a Royce. And Royces didn't collapse. They recalibrated, they retaliated. The shock in her veins began to crystallize into something colder, sharper. A strategy, a plan began to take shape in the ashes of her trust. A plan that would break her out of this golden cage and drive her straight into the heart of a truth she could no longer ignore. The penthouse was no longer a sanctuary. It felt like a tomb. Every ticking second from the grandfather clock in the foyer, every faint hum of the smart climate system, it all mocked her. Mocked her blindness, her hope. She wandered through the echoing rooms, fingertips grazing the glossy surfaces of a life she had believed in. The polished walnut dining table, where they had hosted so many high-profile guests. The buttery leather of the club chair, where Graham read the Financial Times each morning, coffee in hand. All of it felt staged now. A designer showroom masquerading as a home. She returned to their master suite and sat on the edge of the bed, vast, plush, and suddenly foreign. The receipt from Arietta burned in her mind like a brand. It was only one piece of evidence, perhaps even circumstantial. But suspicion was a toxin. And certainty was a blade. Her mind began to spin, replaying the last few weeks in reverse, sorting through every interaction, every conversation, every dismissive answer she'd let go unquestioned. The late-night calls where he whispered into his phone from the balcony. The meetings that seemed to multiply out of nowhere. She had missed the signs, but not anymore. Those weekends he claimed to spend at the office. He'd return home relaxed, refreshed, not exhausted, not like someone battling deadlines. And the password on his personal laptop, once her birthday for years, had suddenly changed. At the time, she chalked it up to new cybersecurity protocols at his firm. Now it felt like a door, slammed and bolted shut. She hadn't questioned it then. The next morning, Camille arrived, her gaze instantly locked onto Madeline, analyzing her like only a sister could. Where Madeline was calm and composed, Camille Royce was sharp and outspoken, fiercely loyal, unafraid to speak the truths others avoided. Her gut rarely failed her. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Camille said, skipping any pleasantries as she dropped her designer tote onto a velvet chair. "Let me guess, Mr. Billionaire forgot to kiss his glowing wife goodbye?" Madeline's careful facade fractured. Wordlessly, she handed Camille the receipt. Camille's eyes narrowed as she read. Her lips compressed into a hard, knowing line. "Size small," she said flatly. "Yeah, that's not for you." Unless he's planning 2 years ahead, which, let's be honest, he isn't. Graham may be many things, but future lingerie strategist isn't one of them. She looked up. The sarcasm faded from her tone, replaced by genuine concern. "Oh, Mads, what happened?" Madeline's voice trembled as she recounted the night before. The sudden trip, the summit in Seattle, the car heading down the Pacific Coast Highway, the scent of someone else's perfume. Monterey. Camille's brain was already racing. Monterey makes sense. Private, off-season, discreet, that's where you hide a dirty little secret, in plain sight. She snapped her fingers. "Graham has a corporate tab at the Avalon." Madeline froze. The Avalon? Her voice came out as a whisper. Graham had taken her there for their first anniversary. The place was luxury incarnate, nestled in a cliffside cove, minimalist and exclusive, where staff were trained to be silent, invisible. No questions, no records. The memory, once golden, now felt sickly. It throbbed like an old wound reopening, a twisted echo of love turned rancid. The image of that anniversary, laughter, champagne, whispered promises, was now overlaid with betrayal, its sweetness tainted. Her stomach turned, and not from the pregnancy. "I have to know," Madeline said, her tone sharpening into resolve. "I can't sit here in this museum of our marriage, waiting for him to come back reeking of deception and another woman's perfume. I need to see it, with my own eyes." Camille watched her closely. The tears were still there, but beneath them, a steel core had begun to form. This was the Royce bloodline awakening, the same relentless will that had turned a shipping dock into a global dynasty. "You're sure, Mads?" Camille asked gently. "You're 7 months pregnant. The stress, the travel, this could be dangerous." "What's more dangerous?" Madeline countered, rising slowly, her hands protectively cupping her belly. "Letting this eat me alive in silence, or confronting the truth head-on?" Her voice didn't waver. "This isn't just about me anymore. This is about my child, and I will not bring a son or daughter into a world built on lies." "I need to know what I'm fighting," Madeline said quietly. Camille nodded, a grim smile playing at the edge of her lips. "All right then. Let's go to war, but we do it smart. No teary phone calls, no scenes. We gather proof, real proof. because lingerie alone doesn't make a conviction. The first step, logistics. The doctor's appointment stayed on the calendar, but this time it had dual purpose. While Camille waited in the car, Madeline kept her original visit with Dr. Miller. The strong, rhythmic sound of her baby's heartbeat filled the exam room. Each beat felt like a steady drum inside her chest, courage in its purest form. "Everything looks wonderful," Dr. Miller said, her smile warm and confident. "A short trip, just a couple of hours by car, won't hurt a thing. Stay hydrated, don't overexert yourself, and you'll be just fine." It was all the permission Madeline needed. Meanwhile, Camille was on the phone, calling in a favor from an old friend in luxury concierge. It was a long shot, but in the high-end world the Bellamys and Royces moved in. No secret stayed buried for long. By the time Madeline climbed back into the car, Camille was furiously typing on her phone. "I think I've got something," she said, voice low, intense. "Jessica, my friend at Duval Lifestyle, pulled some strings. She couldn't get into Avalon's guest records, but she tapped a source in their spa." Madeline held her breath. "There's a 90-minute deep-tissue couples massage booked for this afternoon. Name on the reservation? Mr. Bellamy." The note specified 2 therapists, 1 male, 1 female, and it's booked for Mr. and Mrs. Bellamy. The words hit Madeline like a slap. Mrs. Bellamy. He hadn't just brought another woman to the place where he'd once celebrated her. He was giving her name, her role, to someone else. In this hidden, curated world he'd built without her. Camille's voice hardened. "It's at 4 p.m. That gives us 3 hours. If we leave now, we'll make it." The plan was bold, borderline reckless, but it was the only thing that made sense anymore. Madeline didn't hesitate. She called Frank. Their driver of 3 decades, Frank knew better than to ask questions. When Madeline simply said, "We need to go to Monterey," he answered with a quiet, "Yes, ma'am," and hung up. The drive blurred. The San Francisco skyline gave way to winding highways, then to coastal suburbs, and the open road stretching toward the cliffs of Monterey. Madeline sat quietly in the back of the black Mercedes, a bottle of water in one hand, her other hand resting over her belly. Her thoughts spun, a tangled mess of past promises and impending betrayal. She remembered the day Graham proposed. They stood on a rocky overlook above Big Sur, wind in their hair, the Pacific crashing far below. He had looked at her like she was the only thing that had ever made sense. "My life was black and white," he had said, "until you gave it color." Now it felt like he was trying to repaint everything in lies. Had that been a lie too? Was he just a sociopath in a custom suit, an actor so skilled he'd played the role of loving husband with flawless conviction? Camille, ever the tactician, was focused. "Okay," she said, briskly. "When we get there, we don't storm in, we don't cause a scene. We go in smart. You are Madeline Royce Bellamy. You have every right to be there. You're calm. You're in control. We go to the front desk. You smile, say you're surprising your husband with a weekend visit. Play the devoted wife. Be charming, be poised. They know the Royce name. They won't dare question it." Camille tapped her phone. "His room is Villa 7. Jessica confirmed it. It's their most private suite. Oceanfront. Top tier. Plunge pool. Private terrace. Direct view of the Pacific." "What if he's not there?" Madeline asked, her voice just above a whisper. "What if they're at the spa?" "Then we wait," Camille replied without missing a beat. "We order tea, we sit in the lobby, and we wait for Mr. and Mrs. Bellamy to float in from their relaxing, stolen afternoon." "But my bet?" Camille's voice dropped. "They'll be in that suite. People like Graham, they want to enjoy every inch of the fantasy they paid for." As the Mercedes cruised past the understated sign for Avalon Cliffside Resort and Spa, something shifted inside Madeline. The fear was still there, a hard metallic ball in her stomach, but a new sensation was rising over it. Control. No longer just the betrayed wife, she had become the architect of what came next. The one pulling the levers, setting the pace. She was no longer reacting. She was leading, her pulse steadied with the clarity of purpose. Every breath she took felt sharper, more focused, as if her entire body had aligned with her decision. She wasn't just walking into a confrontation, she was stepping into a reckoning. She adjusted her dress, exhaled slowly, and practiced the composed smile she'd need. She was about to step onto the most pivotal stage of her life, and she would not forget her cue. The thread of suspicion had unraveled all the way here, to the edge of the Pacific, and she was ready to tug until the entire fabric of deception came apart. Avalon was a place sculpted from its surroundings. Natural gray cedar, endless panes of glass, and wind-swept landscaping designed to mimic untouched nature. Under the soft silver of the winter sun, it looked like something out of a dream. That beauty felt like a cruel joke. Frank pulled the S-Class under the wide portico, the engine quiet as a held breath. A valet, crisp in uniform, appeared immediately to open the door. Camille squeezed her sister's hand one final time. "Showtime. Remember who you are. You don't walk into this place. You own it." Madeline stepped from the car, drawing her cashmere wrap close around her shoulders. She was grace. She was power. She was maternal dignity, cloaked in calm resolve. No one, not a soul, could see the storm rising inside her. The lobby was a cathedral of quiet opulence. A towering stone fireplace crackled at one end, filling the air with the scent of sea salt and burning birch. Every surface gleamed. Every detail whispered wealth. Only one receptionist manned the front desk, a woman with a chiseled jawline and flawless posture, standing behind a monolithic slab of reclaimed wood. Madeline glided toward her with Camille trailing a half-step behind, steady and silent. "Good afternoon," Madeline said, her tone smooth, effortless. "I'm here to surprise my husband, Graham Bellamy. I believe he's staying in one of your oceanfront villas." The receptionist, Anja, according to her name tag, offered a smile so polished it could have been cast in porcelain. "Of course, Mrs. Bellamy. It's a pleasure to welcome you." She glanced at Madeline's belly and offered a nod of warmth. "May I see some identification?" Madeline handed over her driver's license without hesitation. Anja studied it. Her gaze moved from the ID to Madeline's face, then settled on the name, Bellamy. The recognition was swift. Graham Bellamy was a name that commanded discretion and luxury. "Everything appears to be in order," Anja said, her voice softening. "Mr. Bellamy is currently checked into Villa 7. She paused, then added lightly, "He mentioned he was here for some intense solitary work." The words, casual and well-meaning, felt like a slap. Solitary work. Madeline's expression didn't flicker. Her practiced smile remained flawless. "He works far too much," she said gently. "I thought he deserved a distraction." She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice into something warm and confidential. "I'd love to surprise him," she said, her eyes locking with Anja's. "Would it be too much trouble to get a key to the villa? I want to be waiting when he gets back." Anja hesitated. A second key, without the primary guest present, was a procedural red flag, even for a spouse, especially at Avalon. "Normally," she began, her voice dipped in diplomacy, "we would need to call the room for Mr. Bellamy's verbal authorization." Madeline leaned in just enough. "Anja," she said, her voice a gentle whisper, "I just drove 2.5 hours from San Francisco. I'm 7 months pregnant, and all I want is to see the look on my husband's face when he walks through that door." Her hand moved instinctively to her belly, an honest gesture but perfectly timed. "A phone call would ruin the moment," she added softly. "Can't this be our little secret?" The name, the charm, the pregnancy, the sheer elegance. It was too much. Anja's professional armor cracked. "Of course, Mrs. Bellamy," she said, retrieving a key card. "Villa 7. Anja's smile warmed into something sincere. "For you, we can make an exception. Let me program a key." As the receptionist tapped on the screen, Camille exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Madeline had been flawless. She was playing the part of the loving, radiant wife so perfectly, it was almost frightening. Keycard in hand, they turned away from the desk. "Villa 7 is at the far end of the property," Camille murmured. "It's the most secluded." "The most secluded to do what exactly?" Madeline said, her voice low and simmering. The path to the villa felt like a slow march toward a detonation. They followed the winding trail of slate stones through wild dune grass. The air had turned sharp and cold, heavy with salt. The waves grew louder, no longer calming but violent, crashing relentlessly beyond the bluff. Madeline's composure, so carefully constructed, began to fracture. Dread prickled across her skin. Her heartbeat thundered in her chest. Her palms were slick with sweat, and then they were there. Villa 7. The name was etched into a small, elegant plaque beside a weathered oak door. It looked serene, tasteful, normal, but what waited inside wasn't. Camille stopped beside her. "Are you ready, Mads?" Madeline stared at the door, then let her gaze drift toward the gray, churning ocean beyond. She thought of the tiny life growing inside her, safe, floating, unaware of the storm about to shatter their world. That thought grounded her. "I'm ready," she said quietly. She turned to her sister. "Wait here. I need to do this alone." Camille hesitated. Every protective instinct in her body flared, but the look in Madeline's eyes was unmistakable. This wasn't a request. It was an order. Camille nodded and stepped back. Madeline drew a breath, slid the key card through the lock, and waited. The small green light blinked. A soft click. She pushed the door open. The entryway opened into a living space bathed in pale neutrals, sand, stone, soft linen. It was beautiful, tranquil, deceptive. On a low coffee table sat a bottle of Bollinger, beads of condensation rolling down its silver bucket. 2 flutes stood beside it. One was half full. The other bore a faint smudge of lipstick. Graham's suit jacket, his favorite, was slung carelessly over the back of a nearby chair. And then, from beyond a partially open bedroom door, voices. A man's voice, deep, unmistakable, Graham's laugh, and then a woman's, lighter, delighted in response. The sound froze Madeline in place. There it was. Undeniable. Real. It was happening. Moving as if in a dream, Madeline stepped silently across the room, every breath shallow, every step measured. Her hand didn't tremble as she reached for the bedroom door and slowly pushed it open. The scene before her was one of languid, post-coital intimacy. The king-sized bed was a mess of tangled white linens. Graham sat propped against the headboard, wearing only boxer briefs, a tablet balanced casually on his lap. Next to him, her back turned to the door, sat a woman. She wore a short black silk robe, the one from Arietta, Madeline realized with a sickening jolt. Her dark hair was tousled, her fingers lazily tracing circles on Graham's chest. "You're sure no one will find out?" the woman asked, her voice soft and coaxing. It was familiar, uncomfortably familiar. Graham chuckled, a low, dismissive sound soaked in casual cruelty. "Madeline? Please. She's not the suspicious type. She trusts me completely, thinks I'm in Seattle saving the tech world." He laughed again. "She's a good woman, just a little naive. It's part of her charm." He was about to say more, but something shifted. Maybe it was the air, maybe it was instinct. He looked up and saw her. Their eyes locked. Time stopped. All the color drained from Graham's face. The smugness vanished, replaced by a ghostly pallor. His mouth parted, but no words came out. The tablet slipped from his lap and hit the floor with a muted thud. He looked like a man watching his own executioner walk through the door. The woman beside him stiffened, sensing the tension. She turned. Recognition flashed in her eyes. Then shock. Then dread. Madeline felt the blood drain from her own body. She knew this woman. It was Sloane Davenport, the ruthless, photogenic rising star at Sterling Nash, a direct competitor of Bellamy Capital. Known for her ambition, her brilliance, and her utter lack of conscience. This wasn't some fleeting, meaningless fling. This was a calculated betrayal, with a woman who stood to profit from Graham's downfall. For a few seconds, the room was frozen in a perfect tableau of humiliation, treachery, and realization. It was Madeline who broke the silence. Her voice was not loud. It didn't tremble. It was cool, controlled, and lethal. "Don't get up on my account," she said, her gaze fixed squarely on Graham. "It seems you're in the middle of some very intense, solitary work." She twisted his own lie into a knife. Graham flinched visibly, as if she'd slapped him across the face. The illusion shattered. The life she had so carefully curated, obliterated. And Madeline? She stood in the ruins, unshaken. The victor of this first brutal battle was clear and terrifying. Madeline Royce Bellamy stood in silence, her words still hanging in the air like smoke from a fresh detonation. The stillness was suffocating. Sloane Davenport, ever the calculating predator, was the first to recover. She pulled the silk robe tighter around her body, defiance flickering briefly in her eyes. But Graham? He was paralyzed. The slick, self-assured titan of venture capital was gone. In his place stood a man unmasked, rattled to his core, cornered and exposed. The silence between them screamed louder than any accusation. His naked vulnerability was on full display, and it wasn't just his body that was bare. It was every deception, every carefully crafted lie unraveling at once. "Madeline," he finally croaked, his voice dry, strangled. What are you doing here? You were supposed to be in San Francisco. The baby." "The baby is fine," she interrupted, her voice like a sheet of ice. Strong heartbeat, stronger than his father's. Her eyes drifted disdainfully from Sloane back to Graham. "I see the Seattle Tech Summit has been relocated, and the dress code's more relaxed than I expected." Her tone was surgical. Is she part of the acquisition deal, or just another easily disposable asset? Each word struck like a blade. Her detachment made it worse. It wasn't rage, it wasn't hysteria. It was a composed, calculated fury that cut cleaner than screaming ever could. Sloane's jaw clenched. She stood, slow, deliberate, an attempt at reclaiming power. I think I should go, she said evenly. No, Madeline replied, her voice even lower, calm, yet commanding. It froze Sloane in place. You stay. You were clearly part of this meeting. You should see it through to the end. Madeline stepped farther into the suite, her presence overtaking the room. She glanced around at the perfectly curated setting, champagne chilling on ice, crumpled sheets, panoramic view of the ocean. It's a beautiful room, she said, voice laced with acid. I remember it. Graham brought me here for our first anniversary. Her gaze sharpened again on him. Did you tell her that? Or do the personal histories of the places you desecrate not matter anymore? Graham finally moved, stumbling from the bed, scrambling for his pants like a man caught in a nightmare. Madeline, please. Don't do this here. Let's just talk, somewhere private. It's not what it looks like. She laughed, a short cutting sound with no trace of amusement. Not what it looks like, she repeated. Graham, I'm not a fool. I'm standing in a villa you booked under your name, looking at you and a woman from a competing firm, both half-dressed in bed, with champagne. Her eyes burned into his. It's exactly what it looks like. The only thing I don't know yet is how long it's been going on. That was when Sloane spoke again, calmly, clearly. About 6 months, she said, her eyes never leaving Madeline's. If you're going to have the details, you might as well have them all. It was a cruel, calculated strike, delivered with precision, meant to crack Madeline's composure. But she didn't flinch. She didn't even glance at Sloane. Her gaze remained locked on Graham, the architect of this betrayal. 6 months, she repeated softly, nodding slowly. So it started right after I told you I was pregnant. Her voice was calm, even. That's a special kind of cruelty, Graham. You should get an award. She turned then, her movements fluid, elegant, and walked toward the door. She didn't slam it, she didn't shout, she simply left. And in doing so, she left behind a silence far more powerful than any scream. Outside the villa, Camille stood waiting, her expression tense and drawn. But the moment she saw Madeline's face, cold, composed, terrifyingly calm, she knew. Let's go, Madeline said, her voice flat. They retraced their steps along the winding path. The ocean roared behind them, now sounding less like nature and more like fury given sound. Neither of them spoke until they were sealed inside the soundproof hush of the Mercedes pulling away from the Avalon. That's when Madeline's body began to shake. A full-body tremor overtook her, violent, uncontrollable. The adrenaline was gone, and the betrayal came crashing in. She didn't scream. The sob that broke from her chest was silent, wrenching. The kind that left no air in the lungs. Camille pulled her in, wrapping her arms tight around her sister. He's dead to us, she whispered fiercely. He's nothing. We'll call Dad. We'll call the lawyers. We'll tear him apart. Madeline's shaking slowed, her tears drying into something colder. Not yet, she said, voice hoarse. First, I want to know everything. This wasn't just an affair, she continued, straightening slightly. The woman, she's Sloane Davenport. Camille's eyes went wide. From Sterling Nash? Are you kidding? Madeline nodded grimly. Graham is in the middle of that hostile takeover attempt against them, and he's been sleeping with their star analyst. What the hell is he thinking? That's not just reckless, it's suicidal. I don't know, Madeline said, but I intend to find out. The ride back to the city was silent, tense, weighted. When the car pulled up to the penthouse, Madeline stared at the building for a long moment. It looked foreign, contaminated. I can't stay here, she whispered. She turned to Frank. Take me to my father's, Upper East Side. He nodded silently, and as they pulled away, her phone buzzed in her hand, just as she stepped into the elegant old-world lobby of her father's home. It was Graham. Madeline stared at the phone as it buzzed relentlessly. Call after call, she ignored each one. By the 10th attempt, a text lit up the screen. Mads, I know you hate me. I deserve it, but you have to listen. It's not what you think. Sloane isn't my mistress. It's business. I'm using her. Call me. It's vital. She stared at the message, her heart pounding in her chest. I'm using her. It was a desperate, self-serving line. A narcissist's pivot. A reframe. Turn betrayal into strategy. turned deception into sacrifice. He was trying to reach the part of her that understood power, leverage, ruthlessness, the part of her that had once admired it in him. She nearly deleted the message, but that name, Sloane, and the sheer absurdity of the claim gave her pause. Could he be telling some twisted version of the truth? Sloane Davenport wasn't just a fling. She was a top-tier asset at Sterling Nash, a rival firm targeted in an aggressive takeover. It was too specific, too dangerous, too reckless to be meaningless. Her phone buzzed again. She's been feeding me inside information. Sterling Nash's defense strategy, their weak shareholders, the works. This was a honey trap, but I said it. It was all for the deal. For us. Please, Mads, let me explain. Madeline froze. This wasn't a man begging forgiveness for infidelity. This was a man trying to repackage espionage as loyalty, trying to turn her into an accomplice. The weight of it hit her like a blow to the chest. Graham Bellamy wasn't just a cheater. He was a liability. He'd crossed every ethical and legal line, and he'd done it under the banner of ambition. He wanted her to see it, not as betrayal, but as partnership. He thought this would win her back. He didn't realize he just handed her everything she needed to destroy him. She looked down at the phone in her hand, standing in the marbled foyer of her father's building, the gravity of the moment settling over her. This wasn't about a marriage anymore. This was war, on two fronts. And Graham, in his arrogance, had just given her the nuclear codes. Alistair Royce's residence was the polar opposite of the sleek glass and marble penthouse Madeline had shared with Graham. It was a monument to old money. Carved mahogany, oil portraits of grim ancestors, the warm scent of aged paper and leather-bound books. It felt like safety, history, power. Exactly what she needed. The apartment radiated permanence and power. Alistair Royce himself was a reflection of it. At 65, he was tall, silver-haired, with ice-blue eyes that missed nothing. A man shaped by decades of market crashes, hostile takeovers, and personal losses, all endured with stoic precision. When Madeline, flanked by a grim-faced Camille, told him everything, he listened in silence. He didn't interrupt, didn't rage, didn't comfort. He absorbed it all, calculating, analyzing, processing it like a multivariable equation. When she finally showed him the text messages from Graham, he said nothing for a full minute, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Then he spoke, low, calm, deadly. He's a fool. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. To attempt to justify infidelity as a business strategy, it's a level of moral bankruptcy that is almost admirable in its audacity. He thinks it'll work, Madeline said, her voice flat. He thinks I'll see it as a smart play, that I'll forgive the betrayal because it's good business. He's appealing to my greed. He's appealing to what he knows best, Alistair corrected. He sees the world through the lens of his own corruption. He assumes everyone is just as transactional. He turned from her, walking toward the towering windows that overlooked the skyline. He's miscalculated, Alistair said softly, and that miscalculation will be his ruin. He folded his hands behind his back. This isn't just a matter for a divorce lawyer anymore. He confessed, in writing, to corporate espionage. If what he's saying is true, it's not just unethical, it's criminal, and it exposes our family to collateral damage. Camille leaned forward. Then let's strike. Release it to his board. Let the scandal eat him alive. No, Alistair said, turning back. We don't rush. We don't create chaos. That's how mistakes are made. He crossed the room with quiet intensity. We wait, we investigate, we verify, and then when we control every piece, we move. We assume he's lying, Alistair continued. The whole "I was using her" angle could be a desperate rewrite. But we also assume he's telling the truth, Madeline said, voice tightening. Which is, in some ways, even worse. A man who turns seduction into strategy, Alistair nodded, is capable of far worse betrayals. Within hours, the Royce residence transformed into a war room. Alistair brought in his top legal counsel and a private investigator, Kobe Levy, a former Mossad operative known for his surgical efficiency and high-risk intelligence gathering. But Madeline, she wasn't just observing. She was commanding. The shock had crystallized into something else, a fury. Cold, focused, and diamond-hard. Madeline was no longer just reacting, she was calculating. A strategist forged from years of watching her father dominate boardrooms and outmaneuver empires. Now that training came alive. She didn't cry, she didn't tremble. She took that rage and tempered it, molded it into something sharper than grief. In her silence was strategy. In her poise, a plan. She worked alongside Kobe Levi, providing every name Graham had mentioned in recent months, every suspicious trip, every change in his routine. She even gave access to their shared cloud drives, family accounts, joint storage, anything that could hold digital fingerprints. Graham thinks his intelligence is his greatest weapon, she told the assembled team in her father's private study, her voice controlled. It's not. His true weakness is his ego. He believes he's untouchable, that he's the smartest man in any room. That's the vulnerability we exploit. The room was still, filled with old wood, leather-bound ledgers, and silent anticipation. She was no longer the woman betrayed. She was the commanding voice in a war room. While Kobe launched his digital incursion, Madeline placed a critical call. She rang Gregory Shaw, Graham's longtime partner and the COO of Bellamy Royce Capital. Gregory was the ballast to Graham's recklessness. A cautious, numbers-driven operator who had more than once confided to Madeline his discomfort with some of Graham's aggressive tactics. "Gregory, it's Madeline," she said, cool and professional. "I need to see you, in person, off the record. It concerns a substantial undisclosed liability to the firm." Her tone left no room for questions. They agreed to meet the next morning, far from Wall Street, in a quiet corner cafe where power still moved in whispers. Meanwhile, Kobe's search struck gold. Buried inside a forgotten folder labeled Vacation Plans, deep in a shared family cloud account, he found Graham's digital vault. Encrypted files, hidden deep. But Graham, in his arrogance, had used a password tied to a personal achievement, the ticker symbol of the first company he ever tanked for profit. It took Kobe's team seconds to crack. Inside, they uncovered a full-blown archive of the Sterling Nash scheme, meticulously organized, strategically annotated, meeting logs, board intel, shareholder weaknesses, and Sloan's name, time-stamped references, alleged briefings, pressure points identified and cataloged. It wasn't just a plan, it was a roadmap of financial espionage. To Graham, it was his magnum opus. To Madeline, it was a signed confession. Her stomach turned as she scrolled through each file, cold documentation of betrayal dressed up as brilliance. He hadn't just been unfaithful to her. He'd betrayed everything, his firm, his values, his own future. But Kobe didn't stop there. He began cross-referencing Sloan's supposed intelligence against Sterling Nash's real-time filings and market activity. That's when the real danger surfaced. A discrepancy. A serious one. And it changed everything. Kobe called Alistair and Madeline into the study. "There's a problem," he said, his Israeli accent clipped and precise. "The intel from the woman, Sloan, isn't fully accurate. Some of it is real, just enough to build credibility. But the most crucial data points, the ones regarding key shareholders and Sterling Nash's debt structure, are them." Subtly, deliberately. A stillness settled over the room. "Explain," Alistair said, his voice low, commanding. Kobe turned his laptop to face them, pulling up a series of graphs and internal memos. The information Sloan gave Graham was designed to push Bellamy Royce Capital into launching its takeover bid at a specific valuation, targeting specific institutional shareholders. "But according to our modeling," he continued, tapping the screen, "this strategy will backfire. It'll trigger a poison pill embedded deep in Sterling Nash's bylaws, a far more aggressive defense than anything she described. If Graham follows the path she laid out, not only will the acquisition fail, it'll leave the firm over-leveraged, exposed, vulnerable. The stock will collapse under its own weight." Madeline felt a cold rush flood her chest. "The second twist," she murmured. "The twist." "She wasn't the honey trap," she said slowly. "He was." Kobe nodded grimly. "She's been playing him from the beginning, feeding him carefully constructed misinformation, stroking his ego, letting him think he was the one in control." Madeline's voice dropped. "She wasn't sleeping with the enemy. She was the enemy. She got inside, used his arrogance as a weapon, and now he's walking blind into financial annihilation." Alistair exhaled slowly. A grim, appreciative smile touched his lips. "Brilliant," he whispered. "Absolutely brutal, but brilliant." He turned to his daughter, his eyes gleaming with something new. "Respect. He handed you a pistol," he said, "and you just discovered it's a cannon." Madeline sat back, her mind spinning into gear. She now held every card. She had undeniable proof of Graham's betrayal, personal and professional. She had his digital confession of espionage. And now she had evidence that his grand strategy was a catastrophic fraud, engineered by the very woman he thought he was manipulating. She could destroy him, or save the company, and reframe herself as the only one with the foresight to spot the trap, the savior, the architect of the firm's survival. The next morning, when Madeline walked into the cafe to meet Gregory Shaw, she wasn't just the woman Graham Bellamy had underestimated. She was Madeline Royce, daughter of Alistair, heir to the mind that built empires, and she was ready to make her first move. Graham didn't even realize the game had begun. But it had. The cafe was tucked into a quiet block of Tribeca, one of those anonymous upscale spots where powerful people whispered dangerous truths under the hum of indie jazz and French press steam. The kind of place where conversations vanished the moment they ended. Gregory Shaw was already there, nursing a single espresso. His expression was drawn, his posture tight. A man who trusted numbers, not hunches, and the cryptic tone of Madeline's call had clearly disturbed him. "Madeline," he said, rising as she approached. "Thank you for meeting me. Is everything all right? You mentioned a liability?" "Hello, Gregory," she said smoothly. Her voice was calm, clipped. She didn't sit down right away. "The liability isn't a what, it's a who." She let that settle before continuing. "It's Graham." Gregory's face hardened. "I don't follow. If this is about the Sterling Nash play, I'll admit his approach is aggressive, but his models are solid. The projections are based on fiction," Madeline interrupted, finally lowering herself into the chair. "A fiction fed to him by his mistress, Sloane Davenport." The name hit the table like a dropped glass. Gregory went pale. "Sloane Davenport from Sterling Nash?" he asked, stunned. That's impossible. That's professional suicide." "For Graham?" she said. "Yes. For her?" Madeline's eyes glittered. "It's career warfare, and she's winning." And then for 20 minutes she laid it out. Not as a scorned wife, but as a strategist unveiling the truth behind enemy lines. Cold, precise, devastating. She showed him a still image, security footage Kobe had retrieved from the Seagate Resort, time-stamped, clear. Graham and Sloane stepping into the elevator together. And then she pivoted. She explained the honey trap, the falsified data, the engineered bait, how Sloane had fed Graham a carefully curated fantasy designed to trigger an ill-timed, poorly structured takeover, one that would activate a poison pill buried in Sterling Nash's charter, one that would leave the firm hemorrhaging capital and exposed to a market bloodbath. She didn't reveal the full extent. She kept Graham's personal files in reserve. Her trump card. What she showed Gregory was pure data, numbers, irrefutable and lethal. Gregory listened. His shock turned to realization, then to fury. He was the man who had spent 2 decades balancing Graham's recklessness with caution, calculating the odds, hedging the risks, to discover that his partner had gambled everything, not just their firm, but their reputation, on arrogance and an affair. It was a betrayal of the highest order. "He's a pyromaniac," Gregory muttered, voice trembling. "A man who thinks he can control fire." "He's about to burn this entire place down," Madeline replied, her tone quiet. "Unless we put it out." "Yes," Madeline said simply, "unless we stop him." "The board meeting to approve the final phase of the acquisition is Friday. We have 2 days." Gregory's eyes locked onto hers. Something shifted in his gaze. He wasn't seeing her as Graham's wife anymore. He was seeing her for what she truly was, a strategist, a player, a real one. "What do you want?" he asked. Madeline didn't hesitate. "The same thing you want, Gregory. To protect the firm, to remove the rot before it spreads." She leaned in slightly. "I want you to rally the board members you trust. My father is already working the institutional investors, leveraging relationships that go back decades. When Graham walks into that boardroom on Friday, I want him to be met with silence. With steel, not with celebration." Gregory narrowed his eyes. "And you? What's your price?" Madeline's voice dropped. "My price is his complete removal from the firm he built. His shares will be bought out at a valuation that reflects the damage he's done. My divorce will be quiet, swift, uncontested. He'll walk away with enough to survive, but stripped of power, reputation, and legacy." She paused. "Graham Bellamy will be a ghost on Wall Street." It was a bloodless execution, and she had already drawn the blade. Gregory stared at her for a long beat, then gave a single sharp nod. "Friday, we'll be ready." The next 2 days moved like a covert military campaign, encrypted calls, discreet meetings, Targeted pressure. Alistair Royce moved behind the scenes like a master conductor, shifting institutional sentiment with carefully timed words. Gregory rallied the board, and with Madeline's evidence, hard data, not emotion, they flipped the last few holdouts. By Thursday night, the outcome was no longer in question. Graham Bellamy just didn't know it yet. Friday morning. The 50th floor boardroom of Bellamy Royce Capital. Graham walked in like a king returning to claim his crown. He believed he was on the brink of his legacy move, the deal that would rewrite his place in financial history. He'd tried calling Madeline dozens of times. She hadn't answered. He assumed she was emotional, hurt, maybe even furious, but he was sure she'd come around. Eventually. Once the billions rolled in, he adjusted his cufflinks, flashed a practiced smile, and took his seat at the head of the table. Good morning, everyone. A historic day. No one smiled back. The room was cold, unmoving, predatory. Gregory sat to his right, expression unreadable. Around the table, board members watched him like a pack sizing up a wounded leader. Before we begin, Gregory said evenly, we have another matter to address. He slid a folder across the table. An independent risk assessment of the Sterling Nash intel has uncovered alarming discrepancies. Graham's smile faltered. What are you talking about? My source is ironclad. Is your source Sloane Davenport? Gregory asked flatly. The blood drained from Graham's face. He looked around, at the cold eyes, the rigid postures. And then he understood. This wasn't a meeting, it was an execution. The boardroom doors opened, and Madeline walked in. She entered the boardroom, flanked by her father and two attorneys. Madeline Royce was composed, regal, her pregnancy no longer a perceived vulnerability, but a living, breathing symbol of the future. And Graham Bellamy was no longer a part of it. She took the empty seat at the opposite end of the long table, directly facing him. Madeline, he stammered, his voice catching. What is this? This, she said evenly, her voice carrying with crystalline clarity through the silent boardroom, is due diligence. Something you abandoned 6 months ago. One of her attorneys slid a folder down the polished wood. It stopped in front of Graham with the quiet finality of a verdict. Inside, a still photo of him and Sloane at the resort, a detailed analysis of the falsified data she had fed him, and on top his own text messages to Madeline, his own words, sealing his fate. I am using her. He stared at the pages, at the crumbling remains of his empire. It had all unraveled so fast. He had been outmaneuvered, outgunned, and utterly destroyed by the one person he had thought he could manipulate. The board has held an emergency session, Gregory said, breaking the silence. His voice was cold, unapologetic. We voted unanimously to table the Sterling Nash acquisition indefinitely, pending an internal investigation. And we are asking for your immediate resignation as CEO and chairman. Graham turned to face them. The board, the men and women who had once cheered his boldness. Their faces were like granite. Then his gaze landed on Alistair Royce. Cool satisfaction. Nothing more, nothing less. Finally he looked to Madeline. There was no pity in her expression, no softness, no trace of the woman who had once loved him. There was only the calm, ruthless confidence of someone who had won. Utterly, completely, he was finished. Sloane's betrayal had been unearthed, but not by him. His affair exposed, his professional reputation shattered. His legacy scorched to the bone. And it had all started the moment he underestimated the woman carrying his child. Madeline stood, her role in the reckoning complete. She didn't need to speak again. Her silence was the final punctuation. She turned and walked out of the boardroom without a backward glance, toward her future. A future she would build with precision and strength from the ashes of her husband's fall. She was no longer just Madeline Royce by name. She had become the living embodiment of the Royce legacy, and her child would be born not into illusion, but into power. Secured by a mother who faced the ultimate betrayal and emerged the undisputed queen of the board. In the end, it wasn't the affair that destroyed Graham Bellamy's empire. It was his hubris. He believed he could compartmentalize everything, his deceit, his ambition, his private indulgences, keeping them neatly separate from his professional life. But lies don't stay contained. They seep, they corrode, and eventually they collapse everything around them. Madeline Royce's transformation, from a devoted, expectant wife to a master tactician, is a reminder that the deepest betrayals can forge the sharpest blades. She didn't just survive, she dominated. By refusing to be defined by betrayal, she reclaimed her name, her power, and rewrote not just her story, but the destiny of everyone in its shadow. So what do you think? Was Madeline's revenge justified? Or did she go too far? Could you have done what she did? So the story is over. Our wonderful friends, are you still here at this hour? If you're still with us, then perhaps something in this story reached into your heart. And maybe, just maybe, you're sitting with a thought or a feeling that's hard to name. That's okay. Let's look at it together. This wasn't just a story about betrayal. It was about awakening. About what happens when truth, no matter how painful, tears down the illusions we build our lives around. Madeline Royce Bellamy thought she had everything: love, security, legacy. But in one moment, it all fractured, and instead of breaking, she built herself anew. This story reminds us that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it stands quietly in the ruins, straightens its spine, and says, "Not like this." In betrayal, she found clarity. In heartbreak, she found strategy. And in the ashes of deception, she discovered a deeper truth. You don't need to be protected by someone else's power. You can become your own fortress. As the poet Rumi once said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." Madeline's journey is proof of that. She didn't just survive, she evolved. She turned devastation into direction. So ask yourself, what truth are you avoiding? What version of your life are you clinging to, even though your heart already knows it's not real? If you felt something stir in you tonight, don't ignore it. Sit with it. Honor it. Use it. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you reflect, please like this video, share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength, and subscribe for more real-life stories that feel like cinematic truth. We're here with you, always.